So let's talk about Form 942. So here's the approach I want you to really think about. So I want you to look right now on the screen. So Form 942 is actually the employer's quarterly tax return for household employees. You can see that the form itself is pretty old. The last revision was in October 1990, so that's pretty old. But for the last 35 years, nothing has really changed. That's why the IRS is now revising this form. But the bottom line here is that we are speaking here about Social Security and withheld income taxes. So you can see, as you can see on the screen here, you have to put your address, the address here, first name, last name, the street, the city, the zip, everything, the state. And then on line 1, you have to put the total cash wages subject to Social Security taxes. And on line 2, you have the taxes themselves. So here we are speaking about you multiplying whatever you have on line 1 by 15.30. So this is the tax. So 12.9 plus 2.9, 12.4 and 2.9% for Medicare. And then you have to put on line 3, the federal income tax withheld if requested by your employee. Because see, the thing is, when you actually have a household employee, the employee can actually choose not to have taxes withheld, but if he or she chooses to, you have to actually report it here. And on line 4, you got to really mention all the total taxes. And if there is some kind of EIC payments, you have to report that on line 5. And on line 6, you have to put all the total taxes. So pretty straightforward, okay? And then you have to sign and you have to date. Again, you are the employer, and this is about quarterly tax return for household employees. The second screenshot I want to show you real quick is actually this is actually your copy, you as the employer. So you have to put the name, your first name, last name, the date quarter ended. So this is a quarterly affair. So March 31st, June 30th, September 30th, and December 31st. And you have to put your EIN in case you have an EIN. Okay. And the third screenshot I want to show you here really has to deal with, this is more granular. This is more sort of providing detailed information about your employee. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. I want to give you the overview. When we talk about Form 942, as a household employer, we want to really talk about a form that can really save you a lot of time, a lot of pain when it comes to tax compliance. Okay, and so as a business owner or employer, it's important to really stay on top of your tax responsibilities. And so one such responsibility is actually filing Form 942, which is really the quarterly tax return for household employees. And so the purpose of the form is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. This is a tax form used by employers who hire household employees, such as nannies, housekeepers, or caregivers. If you have an elderly relative, you have your dad, your mom, or your granddad, your grandma, somebody who's taking care of those relatives in your house, you have to really account for taxes that you owe on those staff members. So 942 really is used to report and pay federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare taxes for household employees. And is actually you can use this form actually to withhold income tax on wages paid to household employees. But the bottom line here is that it's all about how you account for those withholdings. Okay. But one thing I want to say here is that when you think about Form 942, it's the larger picture here is all about compliance. And don't forget that you also have to account for the state taxation part of things, because 942 actually is really helping you stay compliant at the federal level. But if you are in a state that requires also to have a household employees paying the state income taxes, then you have to really make sure that you have you contact state tax authorities to sort of see what your responsibilities are as a household employer. One thing I want to say here is that it's just a lot better to contact the state tax authorities or hire a CPA, an EA, or a local tax attorney to kind of help you out navigate the state tax affairs. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 942. Now let's talk about eligibility about this form here. So who needs to really file it? Well, as I've said before, it really depends on the employment situation that you have in your house. So you want to file if you paid an employee cash wages of $50 or more in a calendar quarter for household work in or around your private home. So we're speaking about $50, okay, not $50,000, $50. And so you want to file if you paid less than $50 in a quarter, but withheld income tax at the employee's request. So what happens here is that anytime you have an employee requesting that you withhold taxes on his or her pay, you need to file no matter what, no matter the amount. Even if it's $1 or $10, you need to file anyway. Now, there are some exceptions though. Do not file Form 942 if the household employee worked in your home on a farm operated for profit. So do not file also a Form 942 if the household employee worked for a college club, fraternity, or sorority. So it's one of those two exceptions where Form 942 should not be filed. Now, when we talk about Form 942, basically we are speaking about what? Household work. But what is it? What is really defined as a household work? Let's talk about that. So this is actually work performed in or around the employer's private home. So this includes services by babysitters, butlers, caretakers, cleaning people, cooks, gardeners. You have governesses, you have housekeepers, janitors, you have laundresses, maids, personal chauffeurs, and valets. So you have a constellation of professionals who are really helping who are helping maintain your house. So you need to really make sure that those professionals are properly accounted for when it comes to taxes. One thing I want to say here is that it's just a lot better to use either to maintain a log of all those staff members, or you can use software. You have software such as Quicken. You know that you can have personal finance software to kind of help you out track the employment that you have in or around your house. Now let's talk about Social Security and Medicare taxes, because honestly, when you talk about work, like when you talk about household work, we're not just speaking about income. We are also talking about Social Security and Medicare taxes, right? Not just income taxes. So both employer and employee must pay Social Security and Medicare taxes on cash wages. So I think I told you a little earlier that you have 15.3%. That the 15.3% actually breaks down into 12.4% plus 2.9%. Okay, 2.9% for Medicare and 12.4% for Social Security taxes. So when you think about that, so this is really this is what the combined Social Security taxes comes to 15.3, right? And but one thing I want to say here is that you have the ability to split. So you have a 6.2% that's paid by the employer and 6.2 that's paid by the employee. This is kind of important, and this is the same thing for the Medicare tax rate. So Medicare, that 2.9% I told you, it's 1.45% employer and 1.45% employee. Now there is no limit on the amount of cash wages subject to Medicare taxes. There is a limit to the amount of taxes you have to pay on Social Security, but for Medicare, there's no limit. And now let's talk about the $50 test. Now, if you remember a little earlier, I told you that the minimum here is $50, right? So Social Security and Medicare taxes are due if you pay an employee cash wages of $50 or more in a calendar quarter for household work, and taxes apply to all cash wages paid in the quarter, regardless of when earned. And the $50 test applies separately to each household employee. So it's one of those things where you have to see what really works for you. One thing I want to say here is that you have the ability to do things properly And it's one of those things where you have to see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. One thing I want to say here is that when we talk about household work, you always have to keep track of the work, not only on a daily basis, but also on a weekly basis, but also on a monthly basis. And you got to keep a log. This is so important. You got to keep a log so that if you're ever audited, you are able to produce the logs to the IRS auditor. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 942. Let's talk about timing here. So let's talk about deadlines. When should you file Form 942? And so, as you said, as you probably saw at the beginning of this show, this is a quarterly return, right? So Form 942 must be filed from the first quarter in which you pay Social Security and Medicare taxes or withhold income tax. And quarterly returns have specific due dates. This is so important. Now, the due date for each quarter is the last day of the following month. If the deadline falls on a weekend or a holiday, you want to file on the next business day. You always want to file on the next business day. And so now it's one of those things where you have the option to file electronically. You have the option. I'll speak about that later on, but I just want to give you a quick heads up. So you always have the option to file electronically. You have the option to file manually. So in other words, you can mail the form itself, 942, or you have the option to go through a modernized e-file provider, so a MEF provider that has a partner with the IRS to allow you to file this form electronically. So basically, where to file Form 942? Well, you want to mail your returns to the IRS at the address listed actually on your like on the form they sent you for your legal residence. So basically, normally the address is listed below your legal residence because every state has a specific IRS service center that really sort of covers that area. So make sure that you choose the right geography, the right address for your specific geography. And one thing I want to say also is that when we talk about this form 942, this is a time-sensitive form because you are reporting tax liabilities to the IRS, especially around employment. So the IRS just wants to make sure that you are actually filing promptly and you are remitting your fair share of taxes promptly to the IRS and not really withholding employee money and not remitting those taxes to the IRS. This is so important. Let me give you a couple of special instructions here. When we talk about Form 942, you have to provide a few details to the IRS so the agency can properly categorize your filings. Okay. First of all, you want to put your name. You want to provide your name, your first name, last name, your address, your EIN if needed, and the calendar quarter. So again, the calendar quarter. If you are on a calendar basis, you have March 30th, June 30th, you have September 30th, and you have December 31st, right? And so you want to check the box that really relates to your specific situation in terms of geography. If you change your address, you want to specify that. You want to enter the date of the last day of the month of the calendar quarter being filed. You need to have your EIN. So this is a 9-digit number that the IRS issues to you. And so use the EIN if you already have one, or write none if you don't have one yet. And if you actually applied for an EIN but have not received it, you want to write applied for in the space for the EIN. And so when we talk about the EIN, we're not speaking here about your Social Security number. We're speaking about you as an employer because this is household employment. So this is basically, you got to have an EIN, especially if you are withholding taxes from your employees' paychecks. Okay, so do not enter your Social Security number as an EIN, and you don't need to file Form SS4 if your only employees are household employees in your private home. And this is important. And so when we talk about the instructions here, everything revolves around being as granular as possible, as transparent as possible. And so you want to follow it. You want to follow instructions. Instructions are pretty straightforward in terms of what you have to multiply by what, and then you have to add. So for instance, you have to multiply by 12.4. This is actually for Social Security, and you have to multiply by 2.9. This is for Medicare. So this is pretty straightforward. So just follow the instructions, and you should be ready to go as soon as possible. Before we close to this conversation, I want to talk to you about a few mistakes that you need to avoid when filing Form 942. Remember, so when we talk about Form 942, it's all about making sure that you're properly submitting to the IRS your tax obligations as an employer, as a household employer, right? So one common mistake here is not calculating the taxes correctly. So you want to use the correct tax rates and follow the IRS instructions carefully. And don't miss also the deadline. Don't submit the correct payment amount. So you just want to make sure that you are basically pretty regular when it comes to the amount that you think you owe and submitting that amount. So make sure to double check your calculations and submit your payments on time to avoid penalties and interest charges. You do not want, that's the last thing you want anyway, because the amounts are not really that big. But if you don't do things properly, you expose yourself to being fined and also penalized in terms of interest charges. Okay, and so if you encounter any issues when filing Form 942, let's say such as incorrect calculations or missing information, you can contact the IRS for assistance. They have a dedicated phone line for household employers at 1-800-829-4933. Again, the number here is 1-800-829-4933. And you can also consult with a tax professional for guidance. You can reach out to a CPA, you can reach out to an EA, you can reach out to a tax attorney to kind of help you out. Okay. So long story short, you want to really file your Form 942 as soon as possible. And so we are speaking here about household employees. Okay. So, nannies, for instance, domestic workers, chauffeurs, valets, and so on and so forth. So you are able to calculate and report those workers' Social Security and Medicare taxes. And so basically, this is even though the form was introduced in 1994, it is still relevant and must be used by those who employ household workers and meet certain criteria. Okay, and so you want to just make sure that you really follow the rules here. And so if you have any question, if after listening to this show you have any questions, please let us know in the comment section. Let us know your location. We want to know your state and city so we can properly guide you. In case you might need to contact a local tax professional, we'll just guide you to the right party, if you will. But normally, if you have any question, we can actually go as granular as possible and provide more details. Okay, I really appreciate it. So in today's conversation, I spoke to you about Form 942, and so let's do a quick recap here. I gave you the approach, the overview, and now I'm doing the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll speak to you another time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.